Hi team, just want to welcome you to phase one training. And what we're going to do today is we're going to focus on our first category, which is the different type of leads that we talk to. Now, this is a very basic training. We're going to go in depth a lot more on different training modules. But today I want to give you a very brief overview of who we're talking to and what does it mean, these different type of lead sources. Real estate's kind of one of those funny industries that just has a lot of nicknames and different vocabulary. So do not feel overwhelmed about not knowing anything at this point. You're just starting out, so this is going to be a great introduction to the different types of people that we're talking to. Now, we break down our business into three groups. We have sellers. Now, sellers are broken down into traditional and investors. So what is a seller, right? So a seller is someone who, pretty simply, needs to have their home sold. So they're in the market, or they were in the market, or they're thinking about being on the market, and they either live at that house or it's an investment property, and they need help selling it. So that's really your first type of people. Now, they come in traditional and investors. So what do I mean by that? Now, a seller can be a traditional seller. And what that looks like is that is just your typical person. It's what we call a homeowner. So this homeowner, this is their primary residence, and that's how we kind of group the traditional sellers together. Is this is the main home that they own, or it could be the only house that they own, but they live there. So they're your traditional sellers. Now investors are a different group, but an investor who's selling a property, they may or may not be living in that residence. So what that means is, let's say you're talking to someone and they say, yes, I need help selling my property. Okay, great, but it's an investment property and it's vacant. What does that mean? So when it's vacant or it's an investment property, basically that person doesn't live there. So investors, they could be all sorts of different types of disguises. For example, a property that can be really an investment property would be an estate sale. And an estate sale is when the person who's actually residing in the home, they may pass away, or maybe they give the property or transfer ownership over to a family, and an estate takes over, whether that's a business or a group of people, most likely a family. So when that happens, the family doesn't live there, right? So it's not their primary residence, and it may be one person or a group of them. If, let's say an older woman passed away, right, and she had 4 kids. Well, she may put in her will that the 4 kids get the estate when she passes on. Now, she doesn't live there anymore, obviously, because she's not here. So that property would technically be considered an investment property for the remaining children. And so that way they're kind of looked at as, more or less investors. So think of sellers, traditional ones, they live in the property. Anybody else would be a different way or a different version of an investor. So those are your two types of sellers that could be selling a property. They either live in the home or they don't. And that's how we break those down. Now, your second type of people are folks who are looking to purchase real estate. And they come in different types of forms. So a traditional buyer is someone who is going to make that their primary residence, right? So you've noticed that the theme to break apart traditional and investor is really who's living in the home, okay? So the traditional ones, let's say that it's a young couple, and they're renting right now, and they're looking to buy their first home. Great, they're going to be a traditional buyer because they're going to actually purchase the home and live in it themselves and enjoy that home. If it's an investor buying in a home, it can be any type of property. And what we mean by that is same thing with the sellers. The investors are buying it not to primarily occupy it themselves. They may either do different things with the property. They may hold it. They may fix it up and sell it, right, in hopes of making a profit. Or they may buy the property and put a tenant or lease it and make that a rental property. And that would be in hopes of producing rental income and making it an asset for them. So those are different types of buyers. Now, investors, this is kind of the tricky category, but these people are great because investors, they're excellent lead sources for a couple reasons. First and foremost, they typically have cash. Now, that doesn't make too much of a difference for you, but we love that because when you buy a house, you can either, pay the full price and use cash, right? Or you can finance it, which is what most people end up doing, meaning they don't have the full amount to purchase a house. So let's say the home's worth $100,000. Maybe they don't have $100,000 cash, and most folks wouldn't, be classified in that category. So most investors, though, who do this full time, they could be working for themselves. They could have a group. So let's say 3 or 4 people decide to team up. Maybe they have a little company, or it's just a little cooperative investment group, and they buy properties together. Or you can have someone, if you make that scale much larger, it could be a big corporation. So it could be, maybe it's an insurance company that has thousands of properties. And what they do is they use the insurance money, they buy up properties, and then they make investment portfolios off that rental income on hundreds or thousands of investment properties for them. And they may have an agent or looking for someone to represent them to purchase properties. So that's a great type of investor. Huge, huge companies, and it goes all the way down to the individual. Might just be one person, or maybe it's a husband and wife who just want to buy some property, and it's a great investment for them. So those are your different types of leads. So this is essentially your 3 categories of people you're talking to. Now, any person can be one or all 3 of them. So for example, let's say you're calling a lead, and you make contact, and you ask them if they're selling their house, and they say yes. Oh, great, okay. But they don't live there. Great, okay, so they're an investor and a seller, right? Because they're not making that their primary residence. And now let's say when they sell that house, though, they're going to go buy another property. So now they're technically, the way we're going to classify them is they're going to be a buyer and a seller, but they're also an investor. And they may do this again in the future, and that would be great because that could be multiple sources of deals for you and the team, the agent that's working with them. So those are your different types of people. Now let's go back to sellers, because our whole business and real estate industry in general, the foundation of our business is built on working with sellers. Now, there's a lot of different reasons why that's the case, but first and foremost, we're looking for listings. Now, that phrase listing means that that's a seller. So a seller who is selling their property, who is going to list it on the market. Now, there's different ways that you can list a property, and this gets into the different types of lead sources. So depending on how the property is going to be listed, this is basically the different categories. Now, you're starting off, your training is one of the first things you learn is how to talk to for sale by owners, so FSBO or FSBO, and expires and withdrawn properties. Now, here's the cool thing with these lead sources. These are typically, traditional or investor, folks who have raised their hand already. And if it's a for sale by owner, basically what they're saying is, I have a motivation to sell my house, but for whatever reason, my circumstances, are enabling me to try to sell it myself right now. And so those are great types of lead sources. So a for sale by owner is basically someone who has a motivation to sell. We don't know their time frame yet, but they're looking to do it on their own. So these are great people to talk to, because 85%, and this is coming from the National Association of Realtors, who tracks a lot of really cool stats for us in the real estate industry, and they basically say within 4 to 6 weeks, and the average is basically about a month, of the average for sale by owner trying it by themselves, they're going to go list with an agent. 85% of them within that 30-day time frame. So that's a great statistic. For sale by owners are excellent leads. They may be some of your best leads that we have for you to convert to help us work with them and get a seller. So that's your first main source. Now, they're trying to sell it themselves. There's also a different type of seller, and this lead source is what we call expireds or withdrawn. Now, what this means is an expired is someone who had a motivation to sell their property, and unlike for sale by owners who want to do it themselves, they already said that they were cool with working with the real estate agent. Unfortunately, the property didn't sell the last time it was listed with that agent. So we kind of categorize expireds and withdrawn in one category. And what that means is the contract that they had with their real estate agent expired and the property didn't sell. Or they could have had a contract with a real estate agent for that agent to help them sell the property, but then something came up. Maybe it was a situation or they didn't like the agent and they terminated that contract and withdrew the property from being on the market. And that's where those two terms come from, expired and or withdrawn. So they already agreed to work with an agent. So these are great lead sources, right? Because they had a motivation to sell and they already agreed to work with real estate agents. So these people, when you call them, really the main reason why properties don't sell the first time around, or second, or maybe multiple times, and they turn into an expired or a canceled / withdrawn, is because of price. So these are really good lead sources to be calling. You're really not cold calling people when you're talking to for sale by owners and expireds because let's just say that we were in the vacuum selling industry, right? And you had to call 100 people you've never met before and sell them a vacuum cleaner. Well, that's pretty tough if of those 100 people, you don't really know if anybody wants to have a new vacuum or is even in need of a vacuum. So with these people, these are great lead sources because you're calling folks who already wanted to sell or currently do want to sell, whether it's by themselves or they already said that they're okay working with an agent, which is great. And the big reason why that's sometimes even better than a for sale by owner is because they already agreed to build in the real estate commission. And that's going to be one of your biggest objections for setting appointments and having us meet with for sale by owners. They want to save the money. But unfortunately, most people aren't experts like we are. And you're going to learn over time that the value we deliver to people is so many different methods and facets that, yes, you can try to sell your property by yourself, but ideally, there's so many things that the industry really needs knowledge and skill sets and really money and time to do correctly. And that's why real estate agents exist, because we provide value in taking over all of those tasks, and we're licensed and trained to do that. And whatever needs to happen to get the property sold, we're licensed and trained to do that at a very high level. So here are some of your best lead sources is for sale by owners or FSBOs and expireds. So just get comfortable with those phrases. Now, investors, homeowners, people who need to sell their house, right? So they're a seller lead. They're coming from all different ways that we find them. So for sale by owner, we have systems to track down that information on the internet and classified ads, newspaper ads, a whole bunch of different websites, and even some of our agents, while we drive by and we're doing our daily tasks, we might encounter a for sale by owner sign and we stop and take a picture or upload it into our database. So there's a whole bunch of ways we get for sale by owners. Expireds typically come from our MLS, and the MLS is our multiple listing service. Now, each state in the US has a different one, and even different states. Let's just take where we are, for example, in Georgia. Within the state of Georgia, we have multiple services that can list properties for sale. So we have multiple MLSs. Now, The one that we focus on is kind of irrelevant for you because just know that when you're using that term, MLS, it means multiple listing service. So that's where we get our expireds. They're people who had listed the property, right, in the MLS with an agent, and it didn't work out. And that contract time frame, which is typically 3 months to a year, and most of our real estate contracts are written just, typically within that 6 months. That's a pretty normal contract time frame. So if that homeowner listed with an agent and they didn't sell that home after 6 months, that'll expire and show up in our multiple listing service as an expired listing. So that's where we get those leads. Now the internet, that's where most of these people that, let's say and they may or may not be a for sale by owner, but maybe they don't listed their self yet and they didn't work with an agent yet and it didn't sell, but they're looking. So they're looking for information. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different websites that are out there to attract seller leads. And we can definitely go ahead and create our own. And in fact, if we do that, these are these different types of sources. Now, don't worry about these acronyms. Just know that anytime we use FHO, EHO, or HPN, these are just acronyms for some of the websites that we call shifted seller sites. And the reason why we call them shifted is because our marketing message to these seller leads is either for a fast offer, a cash offer, or a marketing ad to get the home sold very quickly. And quickly in the real estate industry is 30 days or less, and 60 days or less is kind of your typical standard. So just know that these internet leads come from all different sources. And whether we set them up ourselves through marketing websites, home evaluation sites, doing direct mail, right? So we send postcards and mailers and letters to homeowners to look for people who are interested in selling, and then farming. And what farming means is we pick a certain geographic area or demographic, meaning maybe age, or maybe we want to look at apartment complexes. We would target a certain demographic, so people who are renting, who might be between a certain age group, who have lived there for a certain amount of time. So farming is think of farming as you're targeting an area and we're farming them, we're prospecting that area, doing marketing and effort to obtain and farm, right? Kind of cultivate, that's kind of the analogy there, people who expressed an interest. And once that happens, those are the leads that you're working with. So it's pretty awesome. Our lead sources basically have some type of motivation, or we found them on the internet. And one of the best websites that we have, we call them ZBuyer leads. This is a bunch of different websites that compile together, and this company provides people who are looking to sell their house in all different stages of that process. Maybe they just started, maybe they had a bad experience and they're looking for a different solution. Maybe they're an investor and they're looking to get the property sold quickly, or there's a whole bunch of different scenarios that would motivate someone to sell a house. And these are great leads. And these comprise of investors, homeowners, and wholesalers. So we touched a little bit on what the investor is, right? We know that an investor is someone who needs to either buy or sell property, but is using it for investment purposes. So either to shelter money or make money, right? Either they're going to fix it and flip it, buy and fix for profit, or they're going to buy and hold the property and hold it, meaning that they own the property, but they're going to rent it out and then receive some of that rental income, if not the whole thing, if they pay it off. Now, wholesalers, what are these groups of people? Wholesalers are a type of investor, and we're going to build up your background knowledge later in different phases of the training really in your phase 3 and 4, and really phase 4 after, as we kind of make you seasoned and get you experienced and really kind of give you more about the real estate industry in general, you're going to know all these different type of investors. Now, the most common is what they call wholesalers. Now, wholesalers are kind of unique. What they do is they're an investor who um, are basically selling properties at wholesale prices, meaning they're not listing it, right? They're not putting it on, you can kind of think of the wholesale and retail market, right? So, like, let's say if you go to the food store, you go to a food store, you're typically going to pay retail price, right? Because you didn't go directly to, maybe go right to the farmer and he can give you a wholesale price because all of the expenses that take to ship it and package it and make it available where you are cut out. So now wholesalers are kind of looking to do the same thing with real estate. They don't want to list the property. They don't want to deal with real estate agents. They just want to move that home very quickly at a discount, and they're willing to take that kind of a loss. For them, they typically build in their own profit, and there's a way of doing it. Don't worry about that right now. But sometimes they're really great lead sources because wholesalers typically buy quite a few properties. And if they have a deal, it might be a great contact for our team if we also have other investors and we can kind of be a matchmaker and partner them up and get some deals together. So don't shoot down wholesalers. Always put them in their own category of investors. And that way we always have them if we need that type of experience. So sellers are the main, think of these as seller leads are your foundation. You are always prospecting for sellers. Always. Every single person on the team, every single agent, every single admin coordinator, everybody's main job when you're on the phone is to always, first and foremost, identify seller leads. Because once you have listings, then what happens is you have leads, right? We actually call this the 3 L's of real estate: leads, listings, and leverage. So for us, once we identified the leads, right, we've done the hard work, we've put the leads in front of you, you're going to prospect for listings. So you're looking for sellers to list their home for sale. And then once we get the sellers, once you have a property to do marketing, we can attract the buyers. And so this is really your second type of category, are buyers. Now, pretty straightforward, just like sellers, these are people who are looking to buy property. They're either looking to buy as a homeowner or buy as an investor. Now, where do we get these different types of leads and how are they kind of broken down? So, we have certain marketing channels. Just like sellers, there are no equivalent of buyer leads that are doing it themselves or expireds that we can identify relatively easily like we can for sale by owners and expireds. So where we get buyers from are mostly through our current listing inventory, which is exactly why your primary goal is always to work with sellers first. Because with sellers, once we have inventory to list, we'll attract the buyers. And those people typically come in from internet leads from the marketing we're doing for our listing inventory, sign calls on the properties that we have. We put up signs and do marketing to attract calls and text messages from people who are driving in the neighborhood or around the home, and then really a lot of different internet leads. And what that means is we have websites just like our own, the gafinesthomes.com, that are designed to set up a process for a buyer, so specifically searching for homes, right? And once we do that, we ask them for their information after they've done a little bit of search. And you are definitely, feel free to register for our site and take a look so you understand how we're attracting those buyers, and you can kind of get a little bit better understanding of what that looks like. So buyers are mostly coming from lead sources through our listing inventory and our internet marketing. Now, Our last group of people, these are investors. So like I said, investors are probably your most diverse category because a lot of investors do different things in the marketplace to um, identify how they get deals. And that's kind of how we categorize them. So investors can be a lot of different things. They can be a for sale by owner. Most investors, maybe they want to save money to get more profit. They're going to do it themselves. Maybe they're going to sell their home because they might do that multiple times a year and it makes sense for them to do it because they can save on commission. That's cool. Let's ask them if they'll be willing to work with us because the value adding things that we have, their mindset might be that they're saving money when in reality, they're on the wholesale market. And if we list it with us using the tools and resources we have, we might be able to get them retail price and actually get them more money, either through negotiating and marketing and a combination of all of that. So really cool things here. Now other sources, maybe it's an investor who came from an expired property. It might be through the website that we talked about and the different type of marketing messages we're putting out there, right? For fast offers, cash offers. We're going to attract a lot of investors because they want to work with other people, A, so they can get deals, and also so they can sell their homes quickly as well. So really great. And then we're also, through marketing websites and direct mail or our current farms, we also identify investors that way. So these are your different types of lead sources. I want you to get familiar with them. Try to get an understanding of the mindset of who we're attracting. So if you're calling a seller, you can kind of understand now what they're looking for. And then the next process is understanding how we deliver value. And this is going to come from your next phase of training, which is going into the scripts, which is a very comprehensive, and this is the most key part of your position. Don't worry about the background information as much. You do not need to be an expert. Leave that to the real estate agents. Number one, you're not licensed to talk about a lot of different things. And number two, it doesn't really necessarily affect how well you do in your position. You just simply can't know everything about real estate. There's just so much stuff, and it's so dynamic. Even the most seasoned people, we learn something new every day. So don't get overwhelmed. I wanted to touch base specifically for understanding the different types of people you're going to be calling. So that way you can understand where they're coming from. And once you know how to do that and you understand their point A, their situation, it's our job to identify the ones who are motivated, who need to get to a point B, right? They need to buy a home, sell a home, or invest with a home. And then once you know their point A, their point B, we can take them there. And that's where you can deliver value using our scripts and set a lot of appointments and really have some really great success with the team. So I hope that this was very helpful. This is your first time understanding things. Please keep an eye out for fact pages so we have other questions that call center coordinators have asked us and team members. And in the group calls, you'll pick up on a lot more background information as well. So it's extremely important to plug into that too. So happy lead generating. Thanks so much for staying tuned with us today, and make it a great day.